Yes. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get going. Meeting number 45, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, also known as the mighty OGGO. We have a shortened meeting today. We are going to do two 45-minute sessions. The first with our witnesses, Mr. Osowski and then Mr. Manji, who is virtual. Mr. Clerk, can I just confirm that Mr. Manji and everyone virtual has passed the sound test?
Yes, they have, Mr. Chair. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
We'll start with two 5-minute opening rounds. Mr. Osowski, if you wish to start us off with 5 minutes, please. And we are shorter time, so I'll keep you right at 5 minutes.
Thank you. So good afternoon. I'm John Osowski, and up until June 24th of this year, I was the president of the Canada Border Services Agency. As I'm appearing before you today...
Sorry, Mr. Osowski.
I'm sorry.
Okay. No, not problem.
J'ai pas de traduction. I don't have. J'ai rien.
Could you try again, Mr. Osowski?
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm John Osowski, and up until the end of June this past year, testing 1, 2, 3.
Sorry, I'll get you to stop again. I won't take this away from your time. Do you try again? Oh, it's working now. We'll start. You have about 5 seconds left. No, please, from the top, please.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I'm John Osowski, and up until June 24th of this year, I was the president of the Canada Border Services Agency. As I'm appearing before you today as a private citizen, I will remind members of the committee that I no longer have access to any departmental documents on contracts or financials for the ArriveCAN application. I note that you have already met with departmental officials who have provided this information. I think it's important for the committee to recall the operating environment of April 2020 when we received a call from colleagues at the Public Health Agency to develop an application for them to collect traveler and health information. At the end of April 2020, 100,000 people around the world had already died of COVID-19, and infections in Canada were around 30,000 cases. This was a time of great uncertainty, and the need was urgent. Despite the restrictions on entry at that time, the number of travelers for April 2020 were exempt and arrived by air was around 70,000, compared to close to 3.2 million that would have arrived in April the year before. Up until this point in time, travelers had to provide verbal responses to CBSA officers to make sure they were compliant with the myriad of rules that were being established through various orders in council, and the result, when combined with the need for social distancing, made airports a chaotic scene. Paper was being distributed to travelers to capture contact tracing and quarantine plan information. These were critical data points for health officials, both federally as well as provincially, who were desperate to know who was coming in and where were they going. In the early days, the CBSA was collecting huge volumes of paper, and the government was challenged to convert this information into usable, shareable, electronic data, a process that was taking well over 7 days. It was critical that federal and provincial health officials had timely access to this data to slow the spread of the virus. In addition, I recall the average passage time per traveler was up to 7 minutes long, and you might also recall that in those first few months of the pandemic, there were concerns that the virus could live on paper for extended periods of time. Needless to say, it was clear to everyone that we urgently needed a scalable digital solution that would help traveling public as well as healthcare authorities. Fortunately, the CBSA had that initial IT experience with mobile apps in the border context, as we had been looking at similar approaches with our Border 5 colleagues to help speed up border processing of travelers for some time. But the agency needed outside support for the app's quick evolution. As the health measures were continually adjusting, so did the application, with over 70 iterations being developed and released for Apple, Android, and web-based platforms. Many of these were fundamental changes that required significant recoding. As the public health agency was the business owner of ArriveCan, we took direction from them for requirements, and CBSA passed along all data that was collected for them to share with provinces who were desperate for this information. Over time, the CBSA built in new aspects that help validate proof of vaccine certificates for foreign nationals using AI tools, as well as the ability to validate in real time critical provincial QR codes to make it easier for Canadian citizens with whom we had a high degree of confidence in their certificates. Because the app was linked with passports, provincial vaccine credentials, and to CBSA systems in real time, many travelers were never asked any questions about ArriveCan or their healthcare status. Instead, for the roughly 30 million submissions, and I'm told now up to 60 million travelers, the border service officer simply saw a green check mark on the screen advising them that all the border health requirements had been met because the app had provided and validated the information in advance. This allowed the officer to focus on the over 100 pieces of legislation and regulation they administer on behalf of other departments. Eventually, the same approach was applied on the commercial side, where we built in a feature for frequent crossers to have their profile saved so they didn't have to refill the entire set of questions each passage. Each iteration of the app required careful consideration of hundreds of scenarios, regression testing, accessibility, security, approval by the app stores, and linkages with many departmental systems. As I mentioned earlier, we, along with our Border 5 colleagues, were looking at technologies like ArriveCan to better manage risk and improve throughput at airports, something the air industry has been asking for quite some time. And indeed, even though the app is voluntary, it's still being used every day to complete advanced declaration to further speed up passenger processing time at the airport. Budget 2021 provided CBSA funding for traveler modernization, and I would encourage members of the committee to look at a short video about it on the CBSA website. I have given the clerk of the committee the link to this. In closing, I would like to say that I'm incredibly proud of how the agency responded to the call for help from the public health agency colleagues and to help provinces and territories, as well as the air industry. And I'm excited that technologies like this will be used to continue to improve the traveler experience while keeping our borders safe and secure. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Sorry, Mr. Manji, we have you for 5 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Zane Manchi, and I'm one of the co-founders at Laser Technologies. Laser is an engineering and design studio that helps fast-growing startups, as well as large and established organizations, build and ship amazing digital products and experiences. Some of the companies we have helped include Shopify, RBC, The Weather Network, Canadian Tire, Loyalty One, and many more. Projects we have worked on span a number of industries, including healthcare, e-commerce, finance, crypto, media, gaming, and more. When we work with companies, we focus primarily on the design and engineering execution of their products. This includes items such as product discovery, UI, UX discovery, wireframing, high-fidelity designs, architecture designs, product roadmap planning, engineering execution such as back-end infrastructure, front-end engineering, DevOps, and more, and go-to-market strategies. In addition to helping these great companies, we also build our own products in-house. One of the products we built was a COVID-19 vaccine finder chatbot, where someone could text a phone number with a postal code, and that phone number would text them back with the closest 3 to 5 vaccine locations to that postal code. Through this product, we helped over 150,000 Canadians find vaccine locations across Canada. Personally, I've been in tech for over 10 years as a software engineer and a product manager. Prior to Laser, I worked at Google, Yelp, and Instagram, and completed my Bachelor's of Arts and Science degree at the University of Toronto in Computer Science and Economics. I believe I was invited here today because after reading about the dollar figure associated with the ArriveCan app development through a Globe and Mail report, we made a cloned version of the ArriveCan app's front end in 2 days. We did this because we wanted to shed light into how quickly the front end of an app like this could be made and how capital efficient it could be if the right parties were engaged in the process. We believe that by building the front end experience of the app, we could open up a discussion as to how to improve the way Canada produces new technology. And personally, by being deeply embedded in Canada's tech community, we also wanted to show that Canada has exceptional talent that is eager and excited to help out their country if need be. We have already seen examples of this 2 years ago. First, when Shopify engineers created a COVID tracing app for free, and then also a year ago when we created a COVID vaccine finder app. Personally, I love that the government is placing more of a focus on becoming digital first. I hope that we can continue to improve the transparency and efficiency around the development of Canadian digital projects, and also that we can work together towards creating a better structure, team, resources, tools, and frameworks needed to build the best technology for Canadians. At the end of the day, we would love for Canada to become the most proficient when it comes to new technology and be a prime example of a country that develops impactful technology well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being rather concise. Mr. Barrett, we'll start with you with 6 minutes, please.
Well, thanks, Chair. Thanks to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Osowski, do I have your name pronounced correctly? Okay. I'm just going to move through a couple questions as quickly as we can. Have you, in your role, and so I'm going to be referring primarily to your role when you worked for CBSA. Did you have contact with Christian Firth of GC Strategies in that role?
No.
No? And do you know whom in your reporting structure would have dealt with Mr. Firth if there was interactions?
I wouldn't know that.
No. Okay. Do you have did you have a working relationship with Mark Brouillard?
From the Treasury Board Secretary?
I believe he's the Chief Information Officer.
I've known Mark for years, yes.
Okay. And did you have any contact with respect to this project, specifically ArriveCAN?
No.
Okay. And no, any conversations with respect to GC Strategies?
No.
Okay. When did you first brief, to the best of your recollection, the minister on ArriveCAN?
I'm assuming, I'd have to go back, and I'm sure the department has any kind of records on this, that it would have been in early April that after we got the call from the Public Health Agency and asked for the development of the app, because that call came fairly quickly given the volumes of paper, that we would have sent or provided some advice that we had an idea that we could do, I'll call it a quick and dirty app to start capturing this basic kind of information. We would have advised them that we had this approach. But I would reiterate that all of these business requirements that would have come from the Public Health Agency. We were essentially the general contractor for this project.
So did you discuss contracts with the minister during those briefs?
Never.
And how, to the best of your knowledge, how often would you have briefed the minister on ArriveCAN?
I think it was really quite perfunctory in terms of we've got a solution to this problem, and we launched it. We probably, if memory serves, we did a soft launch about a week before it was actually launched nationally. Okay. So it would have been very iterative. And in those early days, we were meeting regularly and discussing many other issues around the border.
Would there have been a higher degree of information sharing between yourself or any of your direct reports and staff that worked for the minister, specifically with respect to ArriveCAN? And my next question will be, if yes, would any of those discussions involve contracts?
I wouldn't be aware of that. I mean, certainly my IT folks and the staff in the travelers branch would have been working with their public health colleagues in terms of what's the art of the possible here in terms of putting something together. Okay.
Do you have any familiarity with GC Strategies?
None.
None? Not in your role with CBSA, and not in your post government employment.
None.
Okay. Did CBSA work with PSPC to develop the contracts for ArriveCAN?
Well, I understand, and I think you've heard this testimony because I've listened to it myself, is that there were some contracts already in place that they did some initial task authorizations with, and then they went through a more sort of formal RFP process or a selection process later on. But I don't know the details of how that played itself out because, quite frankly, I didn't need to concern myself with that.
And when you talked about delivering something quickly for the minister, that quick and dirty app, was that developed in-house or was that developed using external contractors?
Well, I think we probably had some external contractors with us at the time, but I think those would be better questions to pose to the department.
To be better questions that would, sorry?
To pose to the department.
Okay. With what frequency were you communicating with PSPC on ArriveCAN?
I never communicated with PSPC on ArriveCAN.
Okay. And who at CBSA would have been responsible for managing that project?
Well, again, the business requirements were established by the Public Health Agency, and
Okay.
any sort of contracting work that was done, because initially we had, okay, so just sort of to play it through a little bit, if I may.
You may.
In the initial phases, Public Health Agency, as the business owner, was going to pay for it. They didn't have the resources available, so we did some in-kind contribution to the early development of it, and then they sought resources through the regular parliamentary process. And then they paid for it, and then, you know, we were basically, as I mentioned, the general contractor for the app.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, in providing that support, that was in-house capacity at the Canada Border Service Agency that did that work for PHAC, who didn't have the capability. Is that correct?
They're a public health agency.
Sorry?
They're a public health agency.
Yeah, no, yes. Well, my question is, did CBSA, you said that CBSA...
Yes, we developed the first version, and I think you've heard testimony that it cost roughly $80,000, and I can't speak to whether or not that was all in-house or whether there were some contractors that helped with that.
That was my question. I think I've got about 10 seconds left. Okay. We'll see if we have another chance for a couple more questions. Thanks very much for your brief answers.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Housefather, I believe you're up for 6.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Osowski and Mr. Mangji, for being here with us today. Mr. Mangji, I'm going to start with you. I think the hackathon, or the work that you did, and I also come from a tech background, has been very much misinterpreted and misused. So let me start by asking you, did you ever claim that all of the costs for ArriveCAN, not just the development costs, but all of the costs could have been done for $250,000? Did you ever say that?
No, that wasn't me.
Because you've heard members of Parliament get up in this House and members of this committee make that claim. So I'm glad that you clarified that. And of course, you also understand that development costs are not the same as all of the different costs that are associated with an app. Right? We're not talking.
Yes. Yeah. There's development costs, and then there's like customer service and a bunch of other costs associated with it.
And so when we get to the question of the app itself, we talked about this app, and we've heard a lot about it at this committee, that there was an original version and it went up through about 70 different updates. When you did the front end hackathon of the app, did you ever go through 70 different iterations and go from one update to the other update? Or did you just take the 71st version, assuming that there were 71, and then replicate the front end?
Yes, we took the latest version and we replicated the front end completely.
And that's not the same at all as going through an original and then doing 70 different updates, correct?
That's correct.
And you didn't do regression testing with each of the 71 different versions, correct?
No, because we only did one iteration.
And you didn't also, as I understand it, replicate the back office, correct?
We didn't do any backend infrastructure.
Which is probably the most complicated part of this type of in-app, correct?
It's hard to say, but yes, it depends.
But in this case, right, because of the fact that each of the different apps, iterations had to work with different systems, whether iOS or Android, because it had to link to all of these different vaccination systems of provincial governments and foreign states. You didn't do any of that, right? I mean, you didn't do security stuff. You didn't do any of that.
We didn't do any iterations, but I also don't know what those definition of those 70 plus iterations is.
Correct, but you never claimed to know, and you never claimed to have done them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just made the one app, the front end of the app, over 2 days by mimicking the latest version of the app.
Right, and you didn't do any restriction to privacy law or any of the other legal, security stuff or privacy stuff that needed to be done, correct?
We did
in
not
terms of an app like this to comply with Canadian legislation.
Yes, we did not do research.
You didn't translate everything, did you?
No, we didn't do internationalization.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And you didn't do user testing to see if it was usable, what you did, correct?
No.
Okay, so I think we can both agree that what you did is valuable. It shows that Canadian developers are out there to assist the government, and maybe things could always be done cheaper and better. But your goal was never to show that this was a terrible thing that could have been done for a tiny amount of money versus the millions of dollars that got spent.
No, that was never our goal. Our main goal was to show that there's talent inside of Canada that can build apps like this, but that the way that the app could be built in the future could be done in a more cost-efficient or timely manner.
Thank you. And could I also ask, did any member of parliament or their staff reach out to your company but before you did the hackathon?
No.
Okay, so you did it sort of based on your own inclination to try to show something?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Do I have any time left?
You have a full 2 minutes.
Oh, I do. Okay, great. Thank you very much,
For us.
Mr. Mengji. Mr. Osowski, can I turn it over to you, please? And thank you so much for coming. You're not in the public service anymore. It's very nice of you to come to committee without the resources that you would have had if you were still there, to go through documents and to assist you. So thank you. Can I just make something very clear? I think you answered Mr. Barrett on this, but no politician ever directed you to contract with any particular company on ArriveCAN, correct?
Absolutely not.
And you're not aware, and you would be of monies having gone to any companies that did no work on ArriveCAN, correct? That's not how the system works.
No, absolutely not.
Because you would agree that the people who were working on the app from your department, from PHAC, from PSPC, and everyone else are all professional public servants that always do their best to deliver the best product for Canadians, even if sometimes we make mistakes, correct?
Absolutely.
And so that when the CIO of public safety came to this committee and said that the app she felt was developed in a relatively cost-effective way and was very, very complex, and in the end delivered most of what was needed, you'd essentially agree with her, correct?
Well, I'd go a little further, and I would say for the 70 different versions that we did across 3 different platforms, and if you divide that into the amount of money that it took for the development, that's about $125K per version, which in my mind was very inexpensive. We learned a lot as we went along. This was a new thing for us, to be fair. We started off with something quick and dirty, and then it got very sophisticated in terms of its ability to validate PCR testing that we had for pre-arrival.
I'm afraid that's our time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Vanola, over to you for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My first question will be for Mr. Osowski. Thank you for being here as an individual today. Last November, representatives from the federal government told the committee that a contract for the accessibility to the app was given under national security. There was an exception made to national security rules. So why would that kind of exception be made in this case?
Thank you for the question. So I think officials from the department I see on your website have provided an answer to that. And quite simply, during COVID, what the Public Services and Procurement Canada did was say, during the RFP stage, you could be exempt from the national security requirements, but before you could be given any work, any task authorizations, the clearances had to be satisfied.
Pour les cas de sécurité,
For security, national security, I'm just going to reformulate. Is it usual for this to be sought either during a pandemic or not for accessibility reasons?
Not for accessibility reasons. I think it was really because of COVID and the staff availability to actually do the clearance part of the process.
merci.
Thank you. For security clearance, how does the minister or the department determine the clearance of a contractor? Is it automatic for a contractor to have that security? How is it determined?
think you're better placed to ask that question to Public Services and Procurement Canada, but they're in charge of the security clearance program for contractors.
OK.
$4 million was used for an 18-month period for the app. Is that amount reasonable, low, or high in your experience?
I have no reference point for what's reasonable. I think we had incredible value for money given the context that we were operating in and the need that it satisfied. So for me, I think it was exceptional value for money, and but I have no reference point because we've never done anything like this before.
Est-ce que vous êtes en mesure?
If you can compare the development of such an application before and during the pandemic, can you make a comparison?
Well, I would say before the pandemic, and I mentioned this in my opening remarks with respect to the Border 5 colleagues, so just for clarification, the Border 5 is Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. We were all looking at how could we better deal with managing risk given the environment where volumes of travelers and goods was increasing and the velocity was increasing. And we were all looking at, and is a very fundamental concept of pushing the border out, getting as much data as you can in advance so that you can reduce the interaction time of officers with travelers and ultimately help officers make better decisions about who should be coming into the country or what should be coming into the country. So we were looking at it from that lens. When the pandemic hit, I've got a very capable, or I had a very capable IT team, and they saw this need from the call from the Public Health Agency, and we put this together, as I said, very quick and dirty at first, but eventually it became a very sophisticated program that reduced the traveler interaction time with officers, provided incredibly timely information, real-time information to officers to help them make better decisions, and data to the provincial healthcare authorities that wanted to know where these people were coming from, did they have a quarantine plan, and were they going to be managed appropriately.
Rapidement.
Thank you. Very quickly. We received documents from 2017, that is well before the pandemic. What is the explanation for contracts 3 years before the pandemic being used?
Mr. Chair, I think that's a question for the department to ask.
Merci.
Thank you. How much time do I have left?
5 seconds.
Oh, wow. Monsieur Manji.
Mr. Manji, I want to come back to the cost. $4 million, in your opinion, is that a low, normal, or high cost for data over 18 months for such an application?
That is on the medium to high end of the spectrum.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vignola. Mr. Johns, for 6 minutes, please.
Sure, and there was some unfinished business at the last meeting. I just want to get out of the way if I could, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize to our witnesses. I just need to move forward with a motion that I brought forward, and I just wanted to explain to the committee why I'm moving this. You know, the government continues to procure supplies for the healthcare system, and I believe it's prudent that we ask how we can support a resilient domestic industry to provide essential supplies like personal protective equipment. And we just passed supplementary estimates B here, which included about $136 million in proposed spending for supplies for the healthcare system. So at the beginning of the...
Sorry, if I could just, when you're done with that, could you read your motion into the record, please?
I will, absolutely. At the beginning of the pandemic, our country didn't have enough adequate supply of personal protective equipment, and we struggled to procure supplies during a time of high global demand. The government encouraged Canadian industry to help meet the need for these products, and many small and medium-sized enterprises began producing PPE. These businesses invested in setting up shop, creating innovative products like more breathable and sustainable masks and respirators, and employing Canadians. And sadly, many of these businesses have since shut down or are at the risk of closing because the government awarded contracts to multinationals instead of supporting this emerging domestic industry. And, I'll give you an example. Dave Brimacone, who owns Wayward Distillery in Courtenay, in my riding, is a retired veteran who works very hard. He donated $75,000 of PPE, of hand sanitizer, to local health workers and to first responders. And then later he donated that. Later he got a subcontract, a contractor through Loblaws contracted him to provide it. And then Canada started bringing in foreign supply of hand sanitizer, and it flooded the market and drove the cost down. And then Loblaw's suppliers suddenly canceled the contract after they had asked him to scale up. He ended up eating $400,000 on his own after he came to the rescue of Canadians. So I think it's in our national interest to ensure that we have a resilient PPE industry here. We know new variants of COVID-19 still remain a threat, and we must be prepared for future pandemics. And if Canada does not prepare its own PPE industry, there's a risk that will, there is a risk it will disappear. So we need to ensure that we're prepared for national security. So I believe it would be a good use of this committee's time to hear from domestic PPE manufacturers about the state of the industry and barriers they've faced in the federal procurement process. And I believe this committee could do some valuable and timely work making recommendations on how procurement practices can better support this important domestic industry. So I'm going to read the motion. Motion is that pursuant to Standing Order 108, subsection 2, that the committee undertake a study on the role of federal procurement in fostering a resilient domestic personal protective equipment industry, that the committee have no less than 3 meetings to hear from witnesses, that the committee request testimony from the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, any relevant government officials and industry representatives, and that the committee report its recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, it requests that the government table a detailed response to the report. Thank you.
Right. This is debatable. Does anyone wish to comment it, or is there general support for this?
Yeah, consensus or call the question, Chair.
Yeah, I think if we have consensus, we will consider it passed. Thank you. And Mr. Johns, you've got a minute 20.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much, committee. I really appreciate it, colleagues. I know that, Mr. Ozwowski, first I want to thank you for your service to Canada and all public servants. I think you don't get enough credit, especially through COVID and the amount of hours that you put in to protect Canadians. I imagine when you heard about GC strategies and the commission that these folks were making, the $1.3 to $2.7 million, I mean, you as a public servant didn't earn anything near that. These are contractors that don't even specialize in tech. Can you share your feelings of how that, you can see and sense and understand the outrage of Canadians when they learn of subcontractors that are doing this kind of volume of business and with these grotesque margins?
I really have no comment on the margins, but I can simply say that it's really important for us to have these relationships with industry where they have unique capacity that can come in very quickly and help us solve problems in an agile manner. And so because of that, you pay a premium for it, but I really have no assessment of what's an appropriate amount or not.
We heard from the national president of the Customs and Immigration Union. They said the frontline workers weren't even consulted about the app. I mean, they're dealing with the app day in, day out. Can you speak about, their frustration is valid?
Well, I would simply say for sure at the very beginning, and I'll remind you once again that it was the Public Health Agency's app, that they were the business owner, and so the union doesn't work for them, they work for us, right? So, but there obviously was, in a normal circumstance, they would be consulted. I had regular meetings with Mr. Weber throughout my tenure and his predecessor, Monsieur Fortin. And we talked about the app all the time, and we got feedback from officers, and we did make improvements as time went along. But this wasn't normal times.
Okay.
That's basically your time, Mr. Johns.
I figured.
We'll now have Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes, please.
Could the app have been made for less?
Then what, like the first version of the app, or?
The version that we have today, could it have been made for less money?
I think when you look at the complexity of the back-end systems, the regression testing, the work that was put into it, the call centers, the costs that have all been conveyed to you by department and produced as evidence, you might be able to squeeze out a little bit more, for sure. And I think lessons learned, you know, if we were to sort of look back at it, there might be some stuff that the department, I'm sure, would be willing to hear about as we go forward. But these technologies, as I said, these are critical for the future for us. And if there are lessons learned from this, and I think President O'Gorman said the same, lessons learned from your study, they would be more than welcome to receive them.
Is there anything you would have done differently?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because I was there at the time.
Well,
I would say,
hindsight being you have the benefit of hindsight now.
well, the benefit of hindsight, I would say, is that we were moving very quickly. The orders in council, as those requirements were being established, almost in real time, we were having to reimagine the application and how we were going to recode it. And I really feel for my team that had to put in incredibly long hours to put this together. And I know even in Mr. Manji's blog where he talked about this and how it would take weeks for the App Store to get approved, it took us days, maybe a week at most, for the App Store to approve our version of the app. We were very good at this, but it was incredibly stressful for the team.
Are you aware of any Treasury Board policies having been contravened during this?
Absolutely not.
Program? Thank you. What was the role of your minister in the contract management?
Zero.
And with respect to due diligence, did you ever ask if the requirements from the other agencies, the Public Health Agency of Canada, were necessary? Like,
We met with them regularly to talk about the requirements and what was actually doable at the border, right? Because, as I mentioned, we administer 100 other pieces of legislation and regulation at the border, and we have actually an on-the-ground understanding of how airports and ports of entry work and the throughput, and how you can actually do things like mandatory random testing and or PCR testing or whatever it is. So that synergy that we had discussing these things was a daily conversation with the Public Health Agency.
Are you able to tell us what funding envelope was used to pay the contractor GC Strategies?
I'd refer you to the department for that information.
And did you have delegated authority to approve any of the contracts on this project from the minister?
I wasn't required to sign off anything on these contracts.
Okay. And so who would have signed off on them?
Normally, the procurements are delegated down to at least the vice president or the director general level, but the CFO and his team would be involved in procurement.
Okay. So VP or DG at CBSA.
Yeah.
And did you consult Treasury Board with respect to this program at any point?
The Treasury Board was involved in these calls all the time, intermittently, so they were aware that we were doing this approach to replace the paper in the early days, and they were aware as well in terms of the timing of the orders in council, because those would have been approved with Treasury Board ministers, and the timing issues around the application, yes.
And the contracts, the consultation on the contracts themselves, you were involved in those or no?
I wasn't involved in those.
Okay. PSPC would have signed off on the contracts.
Yes, normally yes.
Okay. And at what level would that?
I have no idea.
Okay. Did you ever meet any resistance from anyone in the public service when you were implementing ArriveCAN?
From public servants?
Yes.
No.
Okay. And from the members of the CBSA?
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Johns referred to the union wanting to have more consultation, but I mean, that was certainly, as I mentioned in the early days, was simply not possible.
Okay. With my last 15 seconds, Mr. Manji, could this app have been made for less money, and could it have been made faster?
I believe so, yes.
Great, that's our time. Mr. Jouari for 5 minutes. Mr. Johns, unfortunately, I misinformed you. After Mr. Jouari, we're done with this round of witnesses. Mr. Jouari for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Osowski, for your work and your team's work. I'm going to ask a bunch of rapid questions, rapid round of questions. I'm trying to get to a couple of points. I understand that development cost of the application was roughly around $8.8 million. The first version was within a couple of months, and it came to about 80,000. 80 ordering council or ICs and 70 rounds of updates to that application within 18 months. Are those numbers facts, sir? Those numbers correct?
Yes. Generally
Okay.
speaking, yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the speed that this application was developed, and we get to the complexities in a minute. So if I take 18 months and I either use 21 working days or 30 working days, divided by the 70 versions that was developed, if I'm using 30 days, it will end up about 7 days a week, 7 days for per version that was developed. And if I use 21 days, it's about five and a half business days was it developed. And in your testimony, you in your response to one of my colleagues, you talked about that each version, with the complexity, with the complete testing, took about a week. Am I right to say that, sir?
It went in fits and starts, but on average, you could say that, yes.
Yeah. So we developed a very, very complex, totally integrated, 70 versions, and we made sure that it meets the requirement that the Government of Canada is putting out, or Health Canada is putting out, to ensure the safety of the people. Each version took 7 days. Do you think we could have done that application under any circumstances faster than 7 days or faster than 5.5 days? I've been in the industry for 21 years, and I like to challenge the comment that this application could have been developed much faster than 5 business days or 7 full days, sir.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I think that you have to build in like the cyber vulnerability testing we did, the regression testing we did, the back end, the call centers, like getting briefings to the frontline officers so they knew what changes were happening with various orders in council. This was literally a 24/7 operation and is a 24/7 operation.
Okay, so you just rhymed about 5 or 6 different activities that happened during 24 hours for 7 days for each one of those iteration. The development must have been only about a day and a half. The rest of it was all the testing, all the verification, and all of that. I just wanted to make sure that's on the record. How many people, how many Canadians, and how many travelers did we get through that application?
I understand it's upwards of 60 million travelers went through with the Arrive Can app.
Okay, so thank you for that. On $8.8 million and over 60 million Canadians or 60 million application going that, what is the dollar per transaction in that you?
I have to do the math. I mean, I did the math earlier of 60 million into the total cost built so far of 41 million, and I think it's about 68 cents per traveler.
Thank you. So if the total cost of 41 million, which is to date, which is not $54 million, and if we look at the development cost only of roughly about $10 billion, that's going to be less than 60 cents a day. So let's say for 20 cents per transaction, we ensured during the pandemic, as changes was coming in, as we saved so many lives. Without these measures and vaccine and the others, we could have put more Canadians at risk. So thank you for that. Now I want to go into the evolution of the sophistication that application was being developed during those 18 months. Can you give us some idea from where did we started and from we ended up based on those 70 requirements, and what level of sophistication did you see?
So I think that's an excellent question, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it was very simply contact tracing and the ability to sort of get the basic traveler information to the provinces. Eventually, we added in the capture of the pre-arrival testing, so the PCR, rapid testing, whatever it was at the time, and putting that in. And eventually, the vaccine certificates. Every country did it completely differently. So for some countries, it was very basic optical character recognition that they would look at. It would be uploaded, and then we would sort of capture that it was a Moderna vaccine, and there were some basic information there for us. And others were much more sophisticated. And I said earlier that because of the QR code that we had with provincial healthcare authorities in Canada, we had a very high degree of confidence in that. And many Canadians came across the border and they were never asked any
I'm afraid I have to
questions.
cut you off again, Mr. Osowski. We are out of time. We're going to suspend very briefly as we switch over our witnesses. Mr. Osowski, Mr. Manji, thanks for joining us today. Statements. Again, we are short of time, so I'll ask you to stick to the 5 minutes. We'll start with you, Mr. Kroll.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking the committee for inviting me to discuss the ArriveCAN application. ArriveCAN cost too much to build. Canadians should be angry, not because of the cost, but because of what our inability to deliver good technology quickly means for the future of our society. This Thanksgiving, a couple of tech firms cloned the ArriveCAN app's front end to show that its development was too expensive. As has been pointed out, this PR stunt doesn't prove much about the cost of the program because it takes more than copying a few screens to run a border. ArriveCAN had to be invented in the first place and deployed and hosted and backed up. As we have heard, just the hosting fees for running it for a year and a half cost $4 million. It had to be updated constantly during that time. It needed to connect to passport and medical and travel databases. Thousands of people from coast to coast to coast had to be trained in the middle of a global public health crisis. ArriveCAN teams faced so many bureaucratic hurdles and outdated rules and legacy systems en deux langues that it's amazing the app was built at all.
In 2 languages?
In a month. And few people are comparing the cost to the alternatives, face-to-face manual processes during a pandemic or shutting down the border entirely. But it was still much too expensive. ArriveCAN costs so much because we do not have a digital government. While some of the ArriveCAN criticism may be a thinly veiled protest about vaccine mandates or public health measures, most of it is warranted because our public sector is falling behind in its ability to deliver reliable, accessible technology on time and on budget. ArriveCAN, each year, the UN publishes an assessment of digital government across its 193 member nations. In 2010, Canada ranked 3rd in the world. This year, we're 32nd. We should be angry because our government is unable to deliver superb information technology quickly and affordably. Canadians already spend nearly 8 hours a day online. We are fluent in apps, living on the web, connected in our classrooms and our cars. We sleep by our phones, and they're the first thing we check every morning. We are always connected with a screen in every pocket, just 15 years after the iPhone was introduced. We are quickly becoming, at least partly, a digital species. In the next century, we will fundamentally rethink everything about government, from how residents interact with public services to how we choose our leaders. 100 years from now, our government will be as unrecognizable to us as modern democracy is to the monarchy. We are changing and government is not adapting alongside us. While on the outside, government looks like the thing that builds roads and tests cars and checks crops and staffs service desks and protects coastlines and, yes, chairs committees, at its core, government deals in information. Government ushered in the mainframe, the internet, satellites. Government is information technology. As chair of the world's leading conference on digital government and public sector modernization, I have had the chance to speak with the national CIOs from dozens of countries, including many who now outrank us on the UN's digital government assessment. In those countries, people brag about the amazing apps they're building for their fellow citizens. Innovation and experimentation are celebrated. New graduates want to work in government technology. Yet here in Canada, we are stumbling into the digital age. The answer is not more outsourcing. There's plenty of room for public-private sector collaboration on the utility parts of computing and technology, such as cloud computing or broadband or off-the-shelf software. But I don't want a government to be a hollowed-out shell of policymakers and bureaucrats completely dependent on the private sector for its operation. We cannot abdicate the reinvention of our society to others. Government must code. Fixing this problem will take real, meaningful changes in compensation, culture, training, and yes, the replacement of those who can't or won't adapt. Many of these changes are politically unappealing, but they are also necessary. The hard truth is that we live in a digital society and deserve a digital government. ArriveCAN is a canary in the digital coal mine, warning us that we are unprepared, unwilling, or unable to adapt to that new reality. Mr. Chair, my objective with these remarks is not to give you an exhaustive explanation of why ArriveCAN costs so much, but to frame this conversation in a broader context. I was invited here because of my background in technology startups and my role as the founder of a digital government conference, and I will be pleased to answer any questions from the committee members. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Mr. Hutton, welcome back. We'll give you 5 minutes. Before we do, I just want to point out for those who have not been with us before, Mr. Hutton is a great friend of OGGO and a big part of our, what I think is a groundbreaking report on whistleblower protection. It's great to have you back with us, Mr. Hutton.
Thank you. My name is David Hutton, and I'm a senior fellow with the Centre for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University. I offered myself as a witness because I felt that my particular experience might enable me to offer a useful perspective. As a young engineer, I led the quality assurance of large, complex computer systems by monitoring the development process, conducting independent testing, and approving the final release. Later, as a management consultant, I led my own consulting practice for 20 years, conducting in-depth audits of the management systems of over 100 organizations around the world. For the past 17 years, I've been assisting public interest whistleblowers and advocating for better protection for them. Typically, these are honest employees who speak up about wrongdoing and are punished for doing so. These three apparently quite different careers have something in common: a quest for truth and integrity so that organizations can deal with facts and reality, making them more successful and also serving the public interest. I think that one of the central questions facing this committee is what happened with respect to ArriveCAN on a spectrum from, on one hand, a reasonable outcome and value for money given a fast-changing emergency situation, through perhaps contractors taking advantage of a difficult situation opportunistically, but perhaps entirely legally, through, at the far end, corruption or collusion, where laws or codes of conduct were violated. This is difficult to find out, especially if there are wrongdoers who will do their utmost to hide their misdeeds. But based on my experience and research, if we had even half-decent whistleblower protection in this country, this committee would very likely soon have the answers. Let me explain. Given the cost of this project, hundreds of people must have been involved, public servants and contractors. And if there was any wrongdoing, some of them would certainly know. However, they have no safe way to provide this information to the committee or to the public, as there's no protection from career-ending reprisals for speaking up. That's because Canada has literally the worst protection law in the world. It is supposed to protect about 400,000 public servants, but in 15 years of operation, at a cost of more than $100 million, not a single whistleblower has ever been protected. This system also completely failed to detect the impending Phoenix pay disaster, even though hundreds of people knew about the problems. Let me share some relevant information about Phoenix as an instructive example. With my background, you could understand that I was absolutely riveted by that project. How is it possible that such bad software could be written and released untested and without any fallback into a mission-critical role where it would dispense billions of dollars and directly impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of employees? I read the detailed reports that were available from many sources, but ended up with more questions than answers. So I decided to conduct my own investigation, assisted by the Center for Free Expression. We set up secure channels of communication and called for insiders to share their experiences confidentially. A few responded, and now I have my answers, which I hope to publish in due course. Though I do need more sources to corroborate what I learned, and this is difficult because people are terrified to say anything, even those who are retired years after the event. My story illustrates two things. Number one, that whistleblowers are by far the best source of information to uncover any wrongdoing that may exist in an organization, and decades of research confirm this. Secondly, without protection, very few people will dare to come forward with vital information. And that's the situation that the committee finds itself in today. This is a long-standing problem which affects the work of this committee and all oversight bodies. One obvious solution is to implement proper federal whistleblower protection, as this committee unanimously recommended in 2017. This committee is uniquely placed to help solve this problem because of its track record and its mandate. And if you succeed, this will help clarify the true status of many projects from Phoenix to ArriveCAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Ms. Kusi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both of our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Hutton, as you're well aware, in 2017, OGGO published a report with recommendations on whistleblower protections. Do you support these recommendations?
Absolutely.
I hope so. Excellent. Do you think if these recommendations in the report were implemented, public servants would have been more comfortable coming forward in cases of wrongdoing?
Well, I think that's undoubtedly the case.
Excellent. Do you believe that if the recommendations in the 2017 OGGO report were put in place prior to the pandemic, that public servants would have been more likely to come forward with concerns around the ArriveCAN app?
If there was wrongdoing, of course they would, yes.
Excellent. Why do you think that the current government has ignored the recommendations in the 2017 report for the last 5 years?
Well, that's a good question. I don't actually see this as a partisan issue. I think successive governments have behaved in this very similar fashion. And what I take from this is that governments in power find it very convenient to not have this avenue of disclosure. And people in opposition would like to have it. And of course, the public would like to have it.
Certainly. I guess coming from the Conservative side, we did introduce Accountability 1. 2017 did come out under the Trudeau government. So I struggle with your point, but I understand. Do you think the Liberal government will continue delaying reforms for whistleblower protections?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do you think the Liberal government will continue delaying reforms for whistleblower protections?
Well, I hope not, but I can't speak to the future.
I'm sure you're well aware that a Bloc Québécois member put forward the Private Members Bill C-290 to implement more whistleblower protections, and I can only assume in the absence of Liberal action, since this report had been made available for 5 years. Do you think the government should be supporting this bill?
I think they should bring it to committee and debate it and make sure it's up to par. I think it's a very good start.
And in the least delay possible?
I'm sorry?
As soon as possible.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Excellent. Do you think if this bill were implemented, it would make public servants more likely to come forward about cases of wrongdoing for big projects such as the ArriveCAN app?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. So I'm sure you're aware as well, the government recently decided to put together a task force to look at reforming whistleblower protections. Did you think this task force is necessary, or do you think that the framework is already available given the 2017 report released?
Well, I could answer that by saying that there's an article I wrote in the Hill Times today, which gives a long answer to that, and people should perhaps read that. But no, I don't think it was necessary. I think that the priority is to get the recommendations that have already made in place, and then there's going to be lots more room for improvement after that.
Certainly. Do you think 12 to 18 months is the right time frame for this task force to make their assessment, especially given that now we've had not only the 2017 OGGO report, the mighty OGGO report, but as well this recent private members bill?
Well, I don't see any purpose in the task force until these other steps have been taken. Once we've got a baseline in place of what's already been recommended, then I think there'll be plenty of room for further discussion, because we still will be far from internationally respected best practices.
So it's safe to say then that the current Liberal government could implement something at this time that perhaps this task force isn't necessary, and perhaps even a delay in implementing an information and a framework that already exists?
Well, I think it doesn't really matter what this task force does, as long as this doesn't impede the urgent implementation of what's already been recommended.
Well, 18 months is quite an imposition. I think it's already being impeded. Do you think that some of the work of the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act Review Task Force would overlap with the parliamentary process involved in Bill C-290?
Could you say that again, please?
Yeah, sure. You think when the task force begins their work that they'll come to a lot of conclusions that are already not only in the 2017 report, but also the Bill C-290 as presented by the member from Mirabel?
Well, I don't know what the task force will come up to, because they're starting from a fairly low base in terms of knowledge and experience, I think. And there's an awful lot of work to catch up on, the work that this committee did. It would take them months to complete the work that's already been done.
What role do you think the Treasury Board should be taking to ensure public servants who witness mass wrongdoing, such as with the ArriveCAN app, come forward and are willing to report it?
Well, the law needs to be reformed. The Treasury Board must start conducting proper oversight of the departmental processes, which is its responsibility. And, those are the main things.
Do you think that not having
I'm afraid that's
adequate...
our time, Ms. Kusi.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah,
I cut you off
it's
a minute
okay.
early.
It's all right.
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. Thank you so much. It's very kind. Pardon me, Mr. Hutton. Do you think not having adequate whistleblower protection for public servants undermines the ability for parliamentarians to get answers about mismanagement of government projects, such as the ArriveCAN app?
Oh, yes, it certainly does.
And without adequate whistleblower protections, do you think parliamentarians and Canadians will get the full answer about what happened with the ArriveCAN app?
Well, as I just said in my remarks, I think that's the central problem here, that without that safe disclosure channel, you're not going to hear from people who may have information that's unwanted.
And do you believe that there are more wrongdoings occurring because of a lack of whistleblower protections?
Well, certainly. I mean, if you look at the other channels that people can use, I ran a small charity for some time. We offered a free helpline service. I was getting inquiries at the rate of more than 100 a year.
Wow.
And that's more than the official agency that's supposed to be protecting people.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hutton. I apologize again, Ms. Kusi. My brain was stuck on 5-minute times. Mr. Kuzmierczuk for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hutton and Mr. Kroll, for your time with us here this afternoon. Mr. Kroll, I really welcome your suggestion to talk about sort of the broader, how to bring our government more into, even further into the digital age, so to speak, and be a leader in terms of digital government. But before we talk about that, I really appreciated the article that you had published a couple of weeks ago entitled ArriveCAN Hot Takes Missed the Point. I thought it was really illuminating. And there's a part in the article that you talked about under a heading, it's called What It Takes to Build an App in Government. I think a lot of folks at home may not understand the differences when a private sector company builds an app for the private sector. Some of the obligations and things that it needs to sort of make sure are working and cross-reference aren't the same as what a government is responsible for when it's building an app. So there's a private sector app and then there's a government app. Can you talk a little bit briefly about the difference in terms of some of the obligations, responsibilities that a government-built app has to sort of tick off?
Absolutely. So the first thing you have to do with any application is design it. In 2020, there was no COVID border app to copy, and so ArriveCAN had to be invented. And the design process itself is difficult because you have many stakeholders and you have to understand how they're going to use the application and make sure that you've met their needs. There's governance. You have to respect users' rights. Ironically, many of the most vocal critics of ArriveCAN are also vocal critics of government overreach and invasions of privacy. They should be happy that we are spending so much time protecting their rights, particularly with medical data, passport data, travel data, some of the most precious data there is. Training. We have to train people on how to use software. It's not magic. Everybody here had to learn how to use Teams in 6 weeks. That had to happen across thousands of employees in real time during a global pandemic. And they had to be trained with each new version of that software. Private companies don't necessarily have to do that. They're also not trying to use those applications in degraded conditions. By definition, every user of ArriveCAN was going to use the app and then turn on airplane mode. I mean, it's called airplane mode for a reason. So your app is naturally going to disconnect. So the testing and the edge cases are very difficult. And so far, that's true for public and for private companies. But when you get into government, you get into much more governance, in part because of accessibility requirements. If you were to call up Tribal Scale or Laser and say, I want an app, oh, by the way, I'd like it to be accessible, they're going to add a line item. They're going to make sure, oh, you want it to work with screen readers? That's going to cost you more. You want it to work with other phones and all these different platforms for accessibility? Government doesn't have the luxury of targeting the lucrative middle. Government applications are for everyone. And that's a much wider range of development and testing and coverage. There's also issues of interoperability working across jurisdictions. There's even language, and I'm not just talking about translation. If one misplaced pronoun gets somebody upset, then a member of parliament's going to get yelled at and a public servant's going to get thrown under the bus. So every word has to be scrutinized when in fact it should just be a matter of fixing it in the next release. So government is under this sort of scrutiny where perfect it may be the enemy of good enough, but government doesn't have the option of good enough. I would say, obviously, we've talked a lot about procurement and the outsourcing and the markups and so on, and those are a legitimate issue. But the lesson here should not be government should outsource more efficiently. It should be government should know how to build apps. We should be in charge of our own future. And if you just look at the markups that we're paying by not having a robust public sector that's technology smart, that explains a significant portion of these costs. And then finally, I think there's the deployment and the backups. When you're building a software application, you have to build a sandbox to build the next version. You have to build a system that can be replicated. You need a backup plan. If this stops working, there are literally thousands of people in transit who can't arrive in the country. So a private company that delivers an app doesn't have to deal with 10,000 people lined up at Dorval Airport wondering how to get into the country. I think it's disingenuous to try and compare the two.
I very much appreciate that. And so it's a much more complicated task. If we were to compare, let's say, from what you just said, building a government app like ArriveCAN to a decathlon in the Olympics, that you have to be good at multiple sports, what would you compare, for example, a weekend hackathon to, like the one that our conservative colleagues would actually prefer us to build?
Well, I noticed that one of the members of the committee mentioned, mass wrongdoings such as the ArriveCAN app. As a citizen who's been studying this carefully, I don't think we've arrived at the point that there are mass wrongdoings of any measure. I think that, in fact, both the leaders of Laser and Tribal Scale agreed with my assessment in no uncertain terms very publicly when I published it. I think it is fair to say that you can copy the plans and clone an app, but that doesn't mean you can run a border.
Let me ask you one last question. So you described the complexity of building a government app. The fact that the government was able to do that in a month, and with 98% effectiveness. There's only 2% glitches. How would you describe that accomplishment?
You're going to have to describe it perhaps in the next round or in writing to us because we're at our 6 minutes. Thanks, though. Ms. Vinola for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with Mr. Hutton. Thank you for being there, to both of you. It's very appreciated. You indicated in your opening remarks that you have done in-depth audits.
Okay, try again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Pas de problème.
No problem. You said in your opening remarks that the firm, the organization that you head up, has done in-depth management assessments of over 100 organizations around the world. And would this apply to this project?
You're asking about my experience in auditing these companies, auditing these organizations?
Si le Canada a le...
If Canada has a similar process, I'd like to know that.
Et ces autres...
And those audits, what is the advantage of them?
These audits, okay. Well, we may be a little bit off topic here, but it's basically to look at how organizations, management systems function in a kind of system fashion, as an engineer would do.
Pouvez-vous fermer votre micro?
Could you just... I'm going to turn off my mic, and I think that will help, because there's a little bit of interference.
So is looking at how an organization is managed in a very systematic fashion, looking at leadership, how they interface with customers and so on. And that would give the organization a very detailed understanding of exactly where they were going wrong from a management system point of view. And that provides them with golden nuggets of areas that they can improve. That's the type of work that I used to do. Does that answer your question?
Oui.
Yes, thank you. In my humble opinion, we should do that kind of audit more often in Canada, and we should apply the recommendations. In your remarks, you talked about ArriveCAN and the concern on the part of contractors and employees to disclose information. Do you have any indication that right now there are bureaucrats or contractors that have information but that they cannot or don't want to provide that?
I don't have any information like that. I don't have any inside information. The only way I would know is if someone had decided to come to us and try and disclose. Their other avenue, if they were public servants, would be to go to the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner. But they would be, they probably won't do that if they study the track record of this law.
Pour Phoenix.
For Phoenix, you established safe communication channels to get information. Does the whistleblower legislation contain such safe channels, or should there be such channels?
Well, the safe channel that we provided was for people to get in touch with us and share information. And that's just the first step. People had to trust us that we would not do anything with it that would be damaging. The problem with the Public Sector Integrity Commissioners is not getting information to them safely. It's what they do with it. And basically, the pattern is that if allegations are mostly ignored, not even investigated, and when you go to that office, they become secret forever, beyond access to information, not just for 10 or 15 or 25 years, but forever. And the whistleblower has really no chance of any remedy for reprisals. As I said, in 17 years, with about 500 whistleblowers having complained of reprisals, not a single one has been compensated.
Donc, si je vous comprends,
So, if I understand correctly, suppose that a civil servant or a contractor under the whistleblower legislation went through the various steps with respect to something related to ArriveCan. Nobody, you, I, or anybody in public would be able to have access to that unless the whistleblower went to the media.
The typical process would be they would go to the Integrity Commissioner with a disclosure. There's then a lengthy process that could take, over a year before that's even assessed to decide whether they're going to investigate. Investigations often take more than a year. And then at the end of the investigations, often a conclusion that there's no wrongdoing. And at that stage, there'd be a report to Parliament. That's the process. It takes years. It very rarely works. We've only had 18 cases of founded wrongdoing in 17 years out of 1,500 disclosures of wrongdoing. So very slow process that rarely ever works. And the wrongdoing that has been reported is mostly really minor compared with other stuff that we've seen going on in the public service.
à votre connaissance, sur ces
To your knowledge, out of those 1,500 complaints or disclosures, how many dealt with information technology?
I couldn't give you that information. I'm sorry.
Thanks. Mr. Johns, over to you. Before you start, though, I just got to notice bells will be at 5:27. We'll be able to get through most of the rounds, but when the bells go off, I'll just ask everyone's consent to just finish off what will appear to be the final 2.5 minutes for the block and the NDP.
Can we just give that consent now, Chair?
Yes. Yep. Perfect. Thanks.
So, Mr. Hutton, if a public servant had blown the whistle on the procurement or development of the ArriveCan app, how likely is that the public or parliamentarians would be aware?
Well, there's no obligation to tell the public or the parliamentarians. The only person that gets to know immediately is the senior, the leader of the department, who's the individual isn't identified, but they are the person that is told. If the Integrity Commission decides to conduct an investigation, which they usually don't, but if they decide to conduct an investigation, they must inform the head of the department. Everything is secret until the whole process has concluded, at which point there's a report to Parliament. And as I said, this could take years.
Okay. I'm just going to read a quick quote. You wrote an opinion piece in the Ottawa Citizen back in October 19th titled, Canada's Whistleblowing System Protects Wrongdoers, Not Whistleblowers. And you were writing about the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. And I'm going to read a quote. It says, when then Minister Pierre Poilievre introduced the legislation in 2006, he claimed repeatedly that it would offer ironclad protection. And indeed it does, but for wrongdoers, not for whistleblowers or the public. It's time for our leaders to do what they have promised and what Canadians expect by putting in place a system that will truly protect the public. Can you talk about the costs on taxpayers, on workers, by the failure to address this serious issue?
Well, gosh, that's almost incalculable. I mean, I would call to mind Phoenix and the 2.4 billion and counting, and it still doesn't work, by the way. And that was a situation that was well known to hundreds of people. Almost everyone who was directly involved in the project. There was a catchphrase, everything going well with Phoenix, which was ironic, that was in common use. And I believe I have evidence that the Integrity Commissioner was given credible warnings about the management of that project. No investigation. So there's 2.4 billion right there. Now, the public service spends about $1 billion every working day. I don't know how much of that is wasted or stolen, but it's probably significant. Anyone who's a professional fraud examiner will tell you that there's corruption everywhere. All organizations experience it, and it's just simply a matter of how quickly you can find it and detect it. We have no system for detecting that.
you wouldn't expect that in a government in a country like Canada. It certainly is a everyday people wouldn't expect that kind of corruption or failure. Now, can you speak about ArriveCan, Phoenix, how preventable these runaway costs could have been if we had a good whistleblower system?
Well, as I say, I have no inside information on ArriveCan. I'm not making any judgment on what this committee may conclude about the project. What I am saying is that if there has been wrongdoing within it, this committee is not going to find out through the current mechanisms. And the comparisons I made with, I'm not trying to compare Phoenix and ArriveCan directly. There are simply some lessons to be learned about all IT work and all government work from looking at Phoenix.
In the 2022 budget, the government committed $2.4 million over 5 years to the Treasury Board Secretariat to launch a review of the Public Services Disclosure Protection Act. Do you think this new review should preclude the House from the House Commons from moving forward with amendments to the Act in the interim to better protect whistleblowers and the Canadian public?
No, absolutely not. I think the process of implementing this committee's recommendations and perhaps examining this new members' bill should go forward as urgently as possible. And that committee, if they want to, can look at further improvements which would take our whistleblowing laws to the level of the European countries, for example, which we're far from. Even with the recommendations this committee has provided are excellent. But there will be still significant room for improvement after that.
So, Bill C-290 came up for debate on November the 2nd. Do you think it's any coincidence that on October 30th, like 3 days before, that the government announced that they'd be moving forward with the review of the Act, and they gave 3 full business days to have representatives apply for 2 positions on the advisory committee? It is striking as part of the review. This is after 5 years, and they had to do it. So, does this demonstrate, do you believe, that it's proper engagement with the public sector unions and the Canadian public?
Well, it does look odd, especially when you look at the pattern of very, very long delays when things are important, and then sudden action on something that I have said to me looks like a delaying tactic.
Talked about the track record of the government in terms of enforcing that. I'm just reading again back to that article. 18 cases of wrongdoing in its 15 years of operation. This is the PSIC. After receiving more than 1,500 disclosures of allegation of wrongdoing, and not one had been protected by the tribunal that was set up for this purpose. Can you speak a little bit more in detail about that?
The law
in
is
about
set
10
up,
seconds, Mr. Hutton.
The law is set up to prevent whistleblowers from ever getting a remedy because of, it's a technical term, there are lots of problems, but there's no reverse onus at the tribunal. The employee has to prove they were reprised against, and that's impossible. The burden of proof has to shift to the employer to show that the actions were not a reprisal.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Thank you, Mr. Johns. Ms. Block for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to, pardon me, I'm struggling with a cold. I want to thank you both for being here today and for your testimony and I guess just the wealth of knowledge that you're bringing to this conversation, your experience. I guess I want to circle back to some comments that my colleague, Ms. Kusi, made and that were followed up on by Mr. Kroll. I guess I want to ask if 10,000 Canadians being forced into 2 weeks of quarantine under the threat of fines or jail is not mass wrongdoing, what would you define as mass wrongdoing?
First of all, I'm not a public health official. I'm not an ethicist. I believe the quote was, witnessing mass wrongdoings such as the ArriveCan app. I cannot speak to whether or not the ArriveCan app was tied to any kind of quarantine or other public health practice. But I think that saying that we have mismanagement of government such as the ArriveCan app seems prejudicial. And I'm not speaking to the effects on citizens as part of travel. I would say that very few people seem to be comparing the costs that we're talking about today to the costs of shutting down a border entirely, the costs of letting a virus burn through our population, or the costs of face-to-face interactions at a time when we had very little science on what was happening. But I can't speak to the matter of your question itself.
You are aware of the reports about 10,000 Canadians being forced into quarantine wrongly. You didn't hear those news reports?
Yeah, I've been following the news.
Okay.
I think that it is not my place to decide what is an acceptable cost to the public in a matter of public health. I think that's better placed for ethicists and philosophers than myself.
So I think you called into question what was considered a mass wrongdoing. And so my question to you was, would you consider that a mass wrongdoing as the result of an app that failed?
I don't think that I can speak to anything other than the cost of software development and the efficacy of that. I don't have any insight into the operation of the application that was delivered by the people using it or the technology used to scan and verify any documentation that might have happened.
Okay.
I'm speaking strictly to the software development side of things.
Okay. Well, I will move on with another question for you. In 12 years, in your opening statement, you said that in 12 years we've fallen from 3rd to 32nd in the UN's assessment of digital government. We're obviously going in the wrong direction in regards to what you would say needs to happen with government becoming a digital government. And I agree with you, especially when I think about what we heard in earlier testimony in regards to the procurement of the ArriveCan app, knowing that there were 3 companies that were chosen that were identified as the companies that could potentially do this. And then surprised to hear that a company like GC Strategies, which subcontracts all the work for an application, they take a cut of somewhere between 15 to 30%, and we cannot get any information on the subcontracting. That is deeply concerning to me because governments need to be transparent and accountable when it comes to the expenditures of Canadians' money. And I guess I would also say that this undoubtedly increases the price of the contracts to government. So not only do we not have access to who these contractors are, but now we also know that it's costing more. I'm wondering if you believe that that the government can create an effective in-house capability, or at the very least, if they should be contracting with IT firms that can do the work themselves in order to save the taxpayers' money.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Will have to be a brief answer as well.
Yes, we are paying a markup because it's in a public health crisis at a time when tech developers are in high demand. The private sector is compensated ridiculously more than the public sector for technological developers. I would refer you to what Amanda Clark, Sean Boots, and Catherine Luello said on the subject. Canada's paying a premium, and we are mortgaging our ability to define our own future by relying on outsourced contracting marked up by third-party procurers.
Great. Mr. Baines for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. I'm going to just start with Mr. Kroll, and my colleague earlier referenced an article you published. You commented that these development shops are building an app in idealized conditions. Can you expand on that, please?
It was Thanksgiving weekend. They all decided to stick around for the weekend and do it. I don't think people were in a similar situation in March or April of 2020. This is a shop that already has access, both cases, to version control software, existing cloud hosting accounts, tools for integrated development environments, tools like Slack or whatever else. They're already set up to do this stuff. They probably have Figma for user interface design. Once you have a pipeline like that, you don't have to go and recreate it from scratch for a new project. When you're cobbling together dozens of subcontractors across firms, often through third-party intermediaries, the overhead of managing and maintaining that process versus what we have within Canada in the Canadian Digital Service and other places is you're already just paying a markup just to get the system to work.
So actually, you just referenced the Canadian Digital Service. In that, how would your proposed app development shop, like in that same article, you mentioned that government should have an app development shop, and now you're referencing Canadian Digital Service. How would your proposed app development shop differ from the Canadian Digital Service?
So the CDS is our best attempt to do that at the moment. The way I would explain it is like Lego. If you're trying to build something out of Lego, you have component pieces that you can put together to build a house very quickly. Our government already has applications like GC Notify, which is a tool that will send out notifications very simply. In fact, at Forward 50 this year, they built a notification system in an hour. We have another one for forms. If you have a form you want to fill out, you use the form tool that we've built. It's automatically accessible, translated, easy to use. It complies with all laws. We have another one for sending out, for example, translation and so on. And you build these building blocks. And then once you have that foundation, you can very quickly create new pieces of technology on top of it. For example, we had a speaker from Ukraine. She's the Ukrainian liaison to the European Union for their digital government. Ukraine has leapt forward in the digital government rankings despite the fact that they're at war. And they have a technology that allows every citizen to be identified by looking at their phone. We don't have a unified digital identity. And as you can imagine, being able to log into a system is the first requirement for being able to use it properly. But in Ukraine, that same tool was very quickly repurposed to report war crimes or to report attacks. And so once you have these building blocks, you can build new things on top of them. But we are not investing in consistent reusable building blocks. The Westminster model encourages each department to build its own things in its own little fiefdoms rather than defining what is a common feature like notification or a form and saying this is what we're going to use and everyone's going to use it and making that awesome. And then letting people quickly build things on top of it as experiments. And when those experiments don't work, taking them back rather than facing criticism. Taiwan has a parallel digital government portal. There's every page that you go to in Taiwan's website, you can replace the GOV with a G0V and see their beta of the current website. And you can go try it. And if it works, they'll make it mainstream. That's a very big difference from our approach.
I think I have maybe time for one more here. We heard from the gentleman who was involved in the hackathon. So in the future, do you believe that the hackathons can add value as opposed to being an opportunity to advertise and market software developers, like in terms of helping government develop apps and have these folks running these hackathons to help improve whatever we're working on?
Rapid prototyping in the form of hackathons is great. It's not a substitute for a finished product. So it can often mislead you. Just because you can do something in a week doesn't mean that that thing's going to be the final product. But I would love to see groups within government doing hackathons on projects when it isn't a crisis. Let's decide what we need to build as a country, and let's build it without it being a time of crisis. Let's set aside money for that kind of investment so it's there when we need it. I think in the private sector, hackathons do a very good job of showing that small, nimble shops can often outpace large, well-heeled organizations that are great at filling RFPs, and we do need to diversify the suppliers of government technology, ideally not going through third parties.
I have to cut you off there. Thanks, Mr. Baines. Ms. Finola for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Kroll, that's very interesting, what you've been saying. Really, I have a question. I think it's a simple question. Over the past few years, hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested by the Canadian government for technological updating and so on. But now our country has fallen to 32nd place out of 192 countries when we used to be at 3rd place. So why has that happened despite the investments, and how has that situation influenced, or perhaps it hasn't, but of the development of ArriveCAN? I will answer in French. I would say it's because other countries have leaped forward. A lot of other countries, like Great Britain and Ukraine, I gave you notes that contain a lot of that information. It's quite surprising to see how they have really advanced. Most identity systems are for things like driver's license and things that are provincial. And so we don't have a federal system. We rely on Google or Twitter or LinkedIn for identification, but the federal government doesn't have anything. But the government is responsible. Mark Zuckerberg can't be responsible for this. So we really need to have as a priority the idea of becoming a digital government. We can't just stay at the back and do things in a manual way. The digital era is here. It's a lot easier to compare digital information. There are a lot of reasons to invest, but I would conclude by saying that there are a lot of people in departments that are against the scale of technological use. It's really time for Canada to accelerate its use.
For 2.5, and then we'll finish up.
You know, my mom was a public servant, and I saw firsthand the sacrifice and how much she cared about her fellow countrymen. It's just amazing, and women. And, you know, the Prime Minister did a statement on June 12, 2022, National Public Service Week. He cited that the government's taking steps to foster a more inclusive workplace. And thinking about hearing all this, and it's not a safe workplace or inclusive workplace when you're in fear, is what I would feel when there's nowhere to turn. Maybe, Mr. Hutton, you can speak about, you know, what kind of workplace this is, given these results, when there's, you know, nowhere to go. Over 50% of public servant workers are off work because of mental health issues. Do you believe that this is contributing to it?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors here, and I think that there, in some organizations, we know from research that in some organizations, whistleblowing doesn't take place because when there's such an open environment and competent management that when some wrongdoing is reported to, so you mention this to your boss, it just gets dealt with and there's no repercussions and it's not even called whistleblowing. But in an environment that's very hierarchical, where there's a fear to report upwards any bad news, and there's a significant amount of harassment, it's a problem, then whistleblowing mechanisms are required. And they're not going to fix this, but they will help to avoid some of the harm because it can act as an early warning and prevent major problems from spiraling out of control. There's no reason in the world that Phoenix should have lasted beyond the first year of its operation. And yet it went on for years and was ultimately released. It's mind-boggling. So the larger picture of the atmosphere in the public service, I have opinions, but I don't have direct experience, so I'll pass.
Add, like, there's the human cost.
Yeah.
There's the cost of the economic leakage of the disasters. Yeah. But there's also the mental health claims that the government's incurring.
Absolutely.
And this is significant. Yeah. And when you work in an unsafe workplace and you end up off work on mental health issues, you need help. And the government's also failing there. So I want to thank you so much for your really important contributions.
I'll just mention that many whistleblowers suffer from PTSD because of what they've gone through, in terms of reprisals and so on. So it's a big mental health issue.
Thanks, Mr. Johns. Mr. Kroll, Mr. Hutton, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it as always. And unless anyone has anything else, we will be adjourned and we can run and vote.
Thank you.